Ladies and gentlemen, we are live here on Tyrant Slayer Studios. We are joined today by very special guests. Hello and welcome. This is our first live stream, and I have no audio on my live stream, so hang on. They can't hear a word I'm saying, honey. We're going to do this. Oh, let's try. There it is. Okay. Now that you can hear me, we are live for the first time in some time. Thank you for joining us here at Tyrant Slayer Studios. Today we have a very special show exposing the egregious corruption here in the state of Connecticut. No, we are not talking about Long Island audits today. We are not talking about Donald Trump or Elon Musk or any of that nonsense. We're not peddling or piggybacking any of the nonsensical theatrics that have been all over our news cycles on independent and corporate levels. Today, we are talking to a very real litigant, a very powerful mother, a very powerful human being, nonetheless. We are joined today by none other, Theodora Antar. Say hello, Theodora.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
And she's got a very powerful story. She's a 33-year-old mother of two from Connecticut. She is a law student, a nationwide legal advocate, and hosts the Life and Law podcast by Pro Legal Solutions. Pro Legal Solutions is also her YouTube channel name. If you'd like a link to her YouTube channel and would like to start diving into her incredible work, very insightful, very knowledgeable, you can go ahead and check her out at Pro Legal Solutions. The link is in the video description. She can also be found on TikTok at Theodora Antar, which replaced her former TikTok channel by the name of Pro Legal Solutions, which was permanently banned in 2024. Maybe we'll have some time to talk about that today. She had 133,000 followers on that channel. So that is a tremendous loss. Theodora has been separated from her two daughters, Angelina, age 6, and Juliana, age 10. This separation has occurred as of March 2024. So she's been enduring for over a year now the loss of her two children, the separation of her two children. 548 consecutive days, as if she knows. She's counting. I'm to let you folks know, I'm reading a bio that she's so graciously provided me ahead of time because I wasn't prepared for such a powerful guest today. So bear with me. It's been 548 consecutive days since Theodora has been together with her children. Both children were unlawfully removed by way of fraud, forgery, and corruption. She has since dedicated and devoted her entire life, its resources, her soul, her spirit, in helping others struggling to fight back against corrupt systems across the country. That being the focus of today's conversation, the family court and the corruption in the state of Connecticut. Theodora, take it away. Please give yourself any sort of introduction you feel you might need beyond what we have just disclosed, and tell the people why you're here today and what you hope to do by the end of this video.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a pretty good description there that you gave. Just that my children mean a lot to me, and being away from them is not easy. And doing everything I do, it's a struggle because I'm missing them. And it's like mourning the loss of somebody who's still alive. And I think so many parents out there can identify with that. So I just want to say, before anything else, I'm a mother, and my children are my number one priority. And my second priority is trying to help others, because I feel like when people find themselves in these situations, it can seem like you don't know which way to go. And a lot of people put their trust in legal professionals, lawyers, things like that, and they end up getting hurt even more. And so I did want to just start by bringing up that one of the things in Connecticut that I think is a huge issue is a lot of the government officials try to censor what happens and what's said on social media and the internet. And one of the ways I discovered you was I saw that you had commented on some posts that a politician had put up. I can't remember his name, but I saw you
Senator Matt
commenting.
Lesser of the state of Connecticut.
There we go, Matt Lesser. And I don't even know how it popped up on my feed. I think like every time I saw any Connecticut politician whatsoever, I would just click follow just because I want to see what they're posting. These are supposed to be our representatives representing us and our kids. And so I'd like to see like, okay, what are they posting? And I saw that he was actually like going at it with you. Like he was replying back to you and said like something along the lines of, I'm sorry that you don't like democracy. Like, is it possible to pull that comment up on the screen? Because I don't know if he deleted it or not, or if he blocked you, but
yes, I could definitely find that and pull it up later in the show for sure.
Yeah. And so like that immediately, I just wanted to reach out to you because I thought like, okay, respects for the fact that you're not like being silent. Because a lot of people, a lot of these posts, they have no comments at all. Or if they have any comments, it's all positive stuff. So it's like, you could tell when it's like a little bot account trying to boost their algorithm, but you get a real comment in there, it stands out. So that's what like kind of like made me notice you. And then we spoke and I realized like, you've been through a lot, you know a lot of what's going on in Connecticut. And shortly after that, another public official by the name of Erin Stewart, who is the current mayor of the city of New Britain, Connecticut. And she's actually currently doing an exploratory run for governor, as she calls it, of the state of Connecticut. And, I previously had, not only did my TikTok get permanently banned, but my Instagram got permanently banned, my Facebook. I had almost all of my platforms get banned, and then some were recovered, some were not. And on my prior Facebook that I had that Facebook for about 13 years. And before it was banned, in 2023, I reached out to Erin Stewart because, for some back context, part of how I lost my now 6-year-old daughter, Angelina, was because in the end of 2022, she started making disclosures about sexual abuse. And she was making disclosures saying that things were happening at her father's house during his parenting time when she was being left alone with her older brothers. So at the time, these things were happening in the city of New Britain because that's where her father was living. So his visitations took place at his apartment in New Britain. And as soon as these disclosures first came out, I spoke about it with my therapist, to be honest. And I spoke about it with other people in my family, friends, because, she was doing some behaviors where she was like acting out things on her stuffed animals. And when I asked her, like, what are you doing? She said, like, the stuffed animals were tickling her. And I asked her, like, has anyone else ever tickled you like that? And she said, yes. And when I asked who, she said Sal and Dom, who are the two brothers that her father has 2 sons from his ex-wife. And those are her 2 half-brothers. And so like typically when he would have his weekend visits, we had a right of first refusal clause in our agreement that stated that if he was going to be unavailable during the parenting time for over 3 hours, if he was going to be, working or had other obligations and couldn't watch her, and if she was going to be left with anyone else besides his mother, then he was required to give me the right of first refusal before leaving her with anyone else. But what he was doing was just going behind my back and leaving her with his son or both sons as a babysitter when at the time she was 3 years old and the oldest son was 16. So, a 16-year-old boy is not a proper babysitter, in my opinion, for a 3-year-old girl, especially a 3-year-old girl like my daughter, who's extremely high energy and like a handful. And so it's like, 16-year-old boy is is also not proper, not to mention that he also had, at the time, oppositional behavioral disorder, where he literally like is defiant and doesn't listen and lies, steals and stuff like that, and ADHD, and he's heavily medicated. So again, like this person wouldn't know what to do in an emergency, wouldn't know the number of the pediatrician, you know, has no contact with me, and the father is like usually unavailable by phone while leaving her with the brother. So like it was already making me uncomfortable from the
Now,
beginning.
real quick, just for the viewers, these were some of your concerns that you addressed to the mayor in New Britain. This all kind of goes back to the mayor of New Britain. And if you're just joining us, we are with Theodora Antar. She is exposing some of the egregious corruption here in the state of Connecticut, relevant to her life, how it kind of culminates with the lives of many victims of our very oppressive, weaponized, shall we even say, racketeering judiciary, which has got its talons deeply embedded inside of our family courts and our children. So yeah, back to Theodora and her story. She's now just diving into the tip of the iceberg, explaining the very beginning of how this kind of all started, how she met me online as a presence speaking out against this tyranny, and how that kind of encouraged and motivated her to do this show here today, and what has happened. And she's going to tell you, no, I'm going to be quiet now because I can't figure out how to fix this segue that I've destroyed. But that's the joy of going live here on Tyrant Slayer Studios. Thanks for joining us, and pay attention because this is important.
Thank you so much. And so, yeah, like I was saying, we started off by talking about Erin Stewart, the current mayor of New Britain, Connecticut, who is also running for governor of the state of Connecticut. And I was talking about how, you know, when my daughter was 3 years old and her older half brother was 16 years old, she first started making disclosures that she was being sexually abused. And what I did after speaking to a therapist, the therapist at the time, her name was Lancia Blotchley out of Southington or Cheshire. And I talked about it in a session with her, and I told her that I asked my daughter, you know, has anyone else ever tickled you the way that you're saying your toy is tickling you? And that she named the brothers. And the therapist said, like, okay, well, I'm a mandated reporter, so you need to report this to DCF. And if you don't report it to DCF, I will, because I'm a mandated reporter and I'm required to report that. So I said, okay, well, and she's like, it's better if you report it than me because you know all the details, you know the whole story. It'll be way better than for you to do it because you could explain it better. But if you're more comfortable with me calling and me reporting it, then I will. And I was like, all right, no, it's fine. I'll call. And like looking back, I should have just let her call because she's the mandated reporter. She's required. And like if the call came in from her, a therapist, instead of me, the mother, it would have been different. But at the time, I wasn't thinking like that. I was in law school. I was thinking like, okay, you know, I'm going to follow the law. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to report this crime. I'm going to cooperate with everything they say. And I was very naive. And so, you know, she's like, call DCF. So I did.
Let me interrupt you there for a moment, if I may. I would say, well, yeah, naive is a good word, but I would say you were more reliant, like you hadn't experienced being a victim of the very system yet. You didn't know then what you know now about the system, and there was no notion then because of that inexperience, shall we say. There was no notion that would have compelled you to say, yeah, this would be better for me for X, Y, and Z if I allow the mandated reporter to take this. You know, a qualified therapist, if you will, a certified therapist, you know, naive, ignorance. I don't know how to best describe it. I would say the reason why you're feeling this way now is because of the victimization you've had to experience and endure in all of this. And at the time, you were more trustworthy. You didn't really see the need to have a reliance like that because you thought, being a loving, passionate mother in law school, no one's going to know better how to articulate the concerns better than you, and what you say won't be, like, you never thought what you could say would be used against you or twisted or turned into some sort of sinister, fictitious narrative and utilized and exploited to hurt you or hurt your children, I would say. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point, and I didn't even realize how somebody could possibly use it against me or twist it. And I didn't realize that there's this whole industry based upon accusing people of lying about abuse. And so basically what ended up happening was I called DCF, I made the report. This was in the middle of October of 2022. And immediately upon making the report, DCF forwarded also the report to the New Britain Police Department, which they stated that that's their policy, that anytime that DCF receives a complaint regarding potential sexual abuse of a minor, they will also forward the same complaint to the police department of the place where the abuse allegedly took place, which in this case was New Britain. And then they will assign police to also join in on the investigation. So initially, they had DCF contact me, and they ended up basically assigning a detective from the New Britain Police Department, whose name was Detective Lisa Renee Steves. And at the time, she was working in their youth bureau for the City of New Britain Police Department, which, as the mayor of New Britain, Erin Stewart is in charge of the City of New Britain. And she has a long-standing relationship with the New Britain Police Department and has the power to oversee what they're doing.
And I'll say this about Erin Stewart and the New Britain Police Department. It has a history of corruption. The police seem to have a sort of indispensable, impenetrable relationship with Erin Stewart that reigns over the general population. The police are allowed through, permitted by Erin Stewart's office, despite being the disclosures made, despite being made aware of the very serious problems, legal problems, civil rights violations, the atrocities being carried out by the New Britain Police Department, despite being made aware. She just continues to allow this stuff to go on unchecked, which kind of seemingly, in my political analysis, goes part and parcel with being a good governor. To be a good governor in the state of Connecticut, you have to let the lawless gang known as the Connecticut State Police do whatever it wants for equity. Everything is about equity, and she seems to be the ideal candidate to allow lawlessness, tyranny, and her own people in her own city to be victimized, even journalists to be illegally incarcerated, for example, just for the equity, knowing the entire time that the case won't ever stick or whatever. The equity behind that is what compels her to stay silent and allow these illegal activities to be carried out here on a day-to-day in the state of Connecticut. So there is no love for Erin Stewart or the City of New Britain under her watch here at Tyrant Slayer Studios. And there is no love for the New Britain Police here on Tyrant Slayer Studios until there are some major changes made and people acknowledge the very, very real problems within these two public offices. It's just going to continue to get worse, and there will continue to be this challenge from Tyrant Slayer Studios to do better. And with that, I digress and give the floor back to our wonderful guest, Theodora. If you were just joining us, we are talking to Theodora Antar. We are live here on Tyrant Slayer Studios. Thank you for joining us. She's got a very powerful story of corruption to reveal to you. She's got a very powerful YouTube channel, and she's a very intelligent, young, bright woman, a very loving mother, very passionate, very vocal mother, sounding off against the state of Connecticut. So listen up.
Thank you so much. And I did want to mention another thing about the New Britain Police Department, that even before these allegations first were made, even earlier than that in 2022, there were numerous occasions where my daughter was left alone in the apartment in New Britain during her dad's parenting time. She was left alone with the older brother, and I would call the New Britain Police Department and ask them to do a wellness check because no one would answer the phone. My daughter was only 3 years old. I felt like it was, inappropriate if I'm going hours and hours without hearing from her, and we had a right of first refusal. And the New Britain Police said to me that their policy is that if somebody calls for a wellness check on a child, they'll go to the house, they'll knock on the door, and they'll try to call the person on their phone. But if they don't answer the door, or if they say, I'm not opening the door, come back with a warrant, like, the New Britain Police's policy is to leave. Like, to compare that to where I was living in Orange at the time, in Orange, they said that their policy is that if somebody says to them on a welfare check for a child, like, I'm not opening the door, come back with a warrant, they will say, okay, well, we need to at least just lay eyes on the child through a window to make sure they're okay. So, like, you don't have to open the door. Just let us lay eyes on the child to verify they're okay through the window, and then we'll go. If you don't let us lay eyes on the child through the window, we're going to kick the door down. That's their policy. New Britain's policy.
In addition to ruining your door and costing you a bunch of money, they'll take your children and force them into a 96-hour stay. They'll force medicate them. They'll force inoculate them. They'll do whatever they want to your kids, and really, in a sort of malicious response, will try to show you who's in charge that way too. So it's very dangerous. People just trying to protect their kids and protect themselves end up being victimized real fast in a very terrorizing, very real way. And it's important to kind of disclose, I think, as much about that as possible. I've been threatened. Hey, we need to see, just like you said, we need to at least lay eyes on the kids. And if you don't do that, we can put a 96-hour stay on them. And it's like, all right, well, bring them to the window then, but one way or another, they get you to surrender this sense of privacy, this sense of security. They violate you one way or another, whether it's at the window or at the door or on the porch. They can't help themselves, the state employees. It's just incredible what people have to, like, how much more anguish are we supposed to endure?
Yeah, and I think it makes a good point, because it goes both ways, just like with anything, where people who actually are calling because they have a legitimate concern about the child, the abuser can then use the I'm not opening the door without a warrant excuse as a way to conceal the abuse, versus somebody who is not abusing their children. Somebody who wants to harass them can just call the police, ask for a wellness check, like you said, harass the people while they're not doing anything wrong and they have privacy rights and they're in their own home and they don't have to open the door. But because there's people that are abusing it, that, they will say, come back with a warrant when they're really abusing the kid. Now they kick people's doors down, but because it's not a statewide policy and it's department wide, New Britain's policy is we never kick the door down, that I'm not losing my job over kicking somebody's door down. And that's what Officer Ryan from the New Britain Police Department said. And when I told him that Angelina was being left alone with Matthew's son for 13 hours straight during an active sexual abuse investigation, when there was also orders saying she couldn't be left alone with him, the police said, even if there's an order saying that she can't be alone with him, that it's not enforceable by the police. They also said that even if she's being left alone with a minor that doesn't have custody of her, that they can't force him to open the door. So there was one instance when my ex told me oh, I'm going to be with her this weekend. I won't be leaving her with anybody. And then as soon as I dropped her off, right after that, he says, oh, by the way, I'm working tonight. She'll be left alone with my son unless you want to take her. So then I had to drive an hour to New Britain to come get her, but his son refused to open the door. And I was trying to call, my ex, he wasn't answering. The son wasn't answering. So I called New Britain Police. And they sent over a rookie cop who said to me, sorry, there's nothing we can do. If he's not going to open the door, it's too bad. I'm like, this kid is 16 years old. He has no rights to my daughter at all. He has no custody. He has no visitation. He has nothing. And he's a minor himself. He's refusing to open the door. My minor child is in there and I'm here to pick her up. And you're telling me that you can't make him give me my daughter back? His father's not even here. And then I demanded a supervisor. And they did finally bring a supervisor. And only after the supervisor came, the supervisor went to go talk to the son. And the son told him he wasn't sure when his dad was coming back. He didn't know where his dad worked, and that his dad wasn't answering the phone. So because of that, the officer took my daughter away from that kid and gave her to me and told me I could go home. And in the police report, it says like, oh, it should be noted that Angelina was very happy to go with her mother. And like that, it said that in the police report that the son said to New Britain PD that his father instructed him not to open the door for police and not to open the door for me. So it's like when an adult is instructing his teenage son not to open the door for police while he's keeping another minor kid in his custody like that, and keeping her from me and concealing her and refusing her to give her to me when I have court orders in my hands. And then the police are like arguing, saying we can't do anything. And only after hours of going back and forth and asking for a supervisor, only then do I get to take my daughter home. So like there was already like those issues with New Britain PD. So then when we reported this sexual abuse stuff with DCF and they assigned it to Detective Lisa Renee Steves from the New Britain Police Department Youth Bureau, you know, I was just looking at it as like, this is only focused on this. Whatever failures that the New Britain PD had in the past are unrelated. I'm going to just, you know, I'm going to be nice to the detective. I'm going to work with her. I'm going to tell her everything she needs to know. And I'm here to protect my child. So what they did was they ended up scheduling, rather than investigating, okay, like New Britain police gets a report that a child's being sexually abused in New Britain. Rather than having the detective investigate, instead, they outsourced the investigation to Yale, a nonprofit third party.
Yeah, because that's what's most equitable. It has nothing to do with who's going to be most effective in investigating. It has nothing to do with creating a better response to the allegation or the concerns. It's, oh, perfect. We have this little revenue stream set up between us and Yale, and we're going to go ahead and tap into that. And we're going to maximize the cost to all the taxpayers to basically, at the end of the day, do absolutely nothing about what's actually happening, what's harming the kid. DCF is infamous for claiming it's going to investigate your claims and concerns, but then doing what is called in a legal setting a preliminary review. We didn't actually investigate. We did a preliminary review. And just listening to some of the things you said as a parent, it's like, I can't believe, you know, I'm the parent and I can't have, you know, access to this, or these services aren't available to me, or the various contexts you've touched on reminded me of an instance where I'm sitting in a criminal superior court here in the state of Connecticut, and a father is being isolated out of his own home by his 16-year-old kid. The Connecticut courts approved a protective order that prohibits his father from going into his own home because his 16-year-old son is in there alone. And his son got a protective order against his dad because his dad yelled at him for not taking out the trash, and it made the child feel threatened. You know, so like we had a situation that I wanted to follow up on. I just forgotten about until today, listening to you, where the Connecticut courts are isolating the parent out of the home and letting the reckless youth take ownership of the domain, the domicile, the home, and keep his parents out. He's doing, who knows what the hell happened to that house, or how that kid might have hurt himself, or what has been going on in that home while dad is, you know, under threat of being arrested and being a felon for the rest of his life, not allowed to go into his own home because this kid has got a protective order. How does a judge in the state of Connecticut go to sleep at night, drive home, talk to people on a 4th of July picnic, walk in a park, and just have a day-to-day with anybody when they're doing things like that? There is genuinely something wrong with the mental health, or they are genuinely part of a conspiratorial racket that leaves them no other choice but to do things this way for the money. And I think it's probably the latter. Like, these people can't be that sick, can they?
You'd be surprised. But yeah, like, and you know, like you said before, like they funnel it into the money, like, and you know, when I was growing up, I also grew up in Connecticut. And so, you know, when I was a child, I experienced sexual abuse as a child. And when I was 14 years old, I was still a minor. I was 14. I went to the police and I reported it. And this abuse that I reported happened from the ages of 4 until the age of 9. When I reported it for the first time, I was 14. So the first time I said anything to the police was 5 years after the abuse had already stopped. So there was no video of it happening. There was no rape kit. There was no evidence. There was nothing. The only evidence that there was my statement, and that's it. And I'm bringing this up because with my statement alone, given 5 years after the abuse stopped, that was enough for the Connecticut State Police to issue a warrant for his arrest and arrest him. And he ended up taking the case to trial because he got an attorney and he pled not guilty, and he wanted to go to trial because he was banking on the fact that most perpetrators of sexual abuse bank on, which is that if they do get arrested and if they are facing charges, that their strategy is usually to just take it to trial, because most of the time they bank on the fact that the victim is going to be way too traumatized, weak, or damaged to have the strength to go in court and sit on the stand and look your abuser in the eye and testify and say what happened. Because not only is
or
that
even simply just distracted, simply being distracted by the overwhelming nature of all of that itself will prevent the person from successfully coming into court and handling it. That the people need to understand. I think one of the most important things you can try to put emphasis on today while telling your story is how it affects the individual emotionally, spiritually, how taxing it all is. People are like, well, why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? It's like, it's not like you don't just turn off the trauma. You don't just turn it all off and get up like nothing happened and be the most productive you've ever been in your life while writing an affidavit. It's so destructive to the mind. You know, there's post-traumatic stress associated with this. When the state is deliberately inflicting psychological and emotional distress upon an individual, because that's what's most equitable for the state, well, that individual becomes incapacitated to a degree. And the state relies on that. To emphasize your point, the state is relying on the fact that you're going to be too tired, too distracted. You're not going to have the strength. You just can't face, the accused or the accuser, what have you. There's many X's, many Y's, and many Z's to be exploited for equity by your weaponized and racketeering judiciary.
Yeah. And the reason I'm bringing up, this from my childhood and my past is not because I want people to feel bad for me or anything, but because I'm giving crucial context that shows that how they handled my daughter's case is not in line with the laws and procedures for the state of Connecticut, but instead in line with a new racketeering scheme that they recently developed in recent years. And so, like I said, with this case, imagine you're reporting a crime 5 years after it stopped. There's zero evidence. You're the only witness, and they're looking at you as unstable. They looked at me as I was a teenager. My family threw me out after I reported it. And so I was meeting by myself with the state's attorney when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, going and having private one-on-one meetings with the state's attorney and him asking me, what do you want to see happen in this case? What kind of sentence do you want? And I kept saying to them that I didn't want him to do jail time. They wanted him to do jail time. He would have did 10 years if he was convicted at trial. But what he did was he pled not guilty because he was expecting that I wasn't going to have the strength to show up at trial. And when I showed up, he immediately told his lawyer that he wanted to cancel the trial and plead guilty. So rather than risking 10 years in prison, which is what his sentence would have been if he was convicted at trial, he instead chose to take a guilty plea, plead guilty, and he was sentenced to 5 years suspended sentence and 5 years probation. And there was other conditions of his release as well. But the bottom line is that he pled guilty, he admitted it, and he was on probation and a suspended sentence. And then after 10 years, he asked the state of Connecticut for a pardon and they denied it. And then the year after that, he asked for a pardon again and it was granted. So now he has no record, but he had a record and was a felon for over a decade and he pled guilty. So everyone
and he got
told
a pardon. That's something to be talked about as well. The state of Connecticut doesn't give any felon a pardon unless you know somebody somewhere.
Well, you know what? He very well might know somebody because a lot of connections have revealed themselves in my case. And so, you know, when I'm thinking about like them saying to me, okay, the police are now assigned to investigate this sexual assault case of a child, I know that the law says that in Connecticut, a police officer is allowed to interview a child no matter what age. There is no minimum age that a child has to be interviewed by a police officer. However, if they're under 18, they're supposed to have one of their parents, at least one of their parents present. And if they want a lawyer, they can also have an attorney there if the parent hires one. So usually if a police officer goes in and interrogates a kid without a parent, that'll get thrown out so quick. If a kid goes in and gives a statement, they're supposed to have the parent there. Okay, but if there's a crime and they say, we want you to come in and talk to us, like what the Connecticut State Police did with me is they had me go down there. My mom came. My mom said she didn't even want to participate and she wasn't supporting me, but they didn't care. They just still went forward. And they just literally had two detectives. They had a laptop. They asked me a bunch of questions and they were typing the answers of what I was saying. So then at the end, they printed it out. They had me read it. They said, is this all correct? I said, yes. They had me sign it. And that was it. So they asked me the most detailed, graphic, invasive questions that you could ask somebody. Every single most invasive question you can think of, they asked. And it was brutal. It was like hours of being questioned. But they got my thorough statement and that was that. And that statement alone was enough to get a warrant for his arrest and enough to end up with a conviction. So in my eyes, I think I got justice because I didn't want him to go to jail. He was paying the mortgage for my mom's house where everyone was living. And I didn't want everyone to be homeless, even though I became homeless because they all threw me out for reporting it. I still wanted to care about them, even though they didn't care about me. And, you know, I thought, okay, when my daughter, when they told me that my daughter was having this detective assigned, I thought that the detective was going to investigate, right? So they tell me that rather than having the detective interview my daughter, that they were going to schedule her for what they call a forensic interview. And the forensic interview that we were scheduled was for Yale, but usually New Britain will send them to places like Klingberg or Hartford Hospital. And so they're like the main ones that do it. Yale, Hartford Hospital, Klingberg. There might be one other, but I'm pretty sure Yale controls all the others. And so the interview, the forensic interview that they scheduled was scheduled on October 31st, 2022. DCF and New Britain Police scheduled it. I didn't. They just said, you're going to have to bring her on this day. And they said to me, DCF said to me, she goes, make sure you don't talk to your daughter about any of this stuff. Don't bring up the sexual abuse. Don't bring up anything. You don't want to be accused of coaching. that was another ding, ding, ding. You should pay attention to this moment. But instead I was, naive, trusting the system. I was like, oh, okay. I should have thought, okay, why is she saying you might be accused of coaching? That should have been like a warning. Like instead I just ignored it. Right. So
Well, you were
instead
inexperienced. I'm going to chalk that up to just inexperience. You had never endured anything like this, and you had no idea how evil the system, the system itself was, how it was seeking to look for things like that to turn into equity, turn into more money, turn into a new problem,
Yeah, exactly. And so then I was like, fine. I listened to everything DCF said. Like I didn't say a single word about it again to my daughter because I didn't want them to ask her some question and her say, mommy told me to say this, so I didn't say anything. I just went about our business. So then on that day I bring her there, like it was Halloween. She wanted to wear her Halloween costume and showed up in a princess dress. So you really think that she's taking it seriously about going to meet with police and stuff? Like she thinks she's just going to some place and they're telling me, don't tell her where you're going or why. So we just get there and then they say that when they do the forensic interviews, they have, first of all, Yale said that in order to do it, I had to sign a waiver saying that I can never get a copy of the interview. I can never see or observe it, that the interview is property of the New Britain Police Department and that they have the right to hold it and that I'll never be able to have any records about what is said and what happens in this interview.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's like you're just the parent, right? I mean, what is that? What sort of weight or value or principle does that hold in any of that transaction? Isn't that the most absurd sort of? I mean, was it at that point when they presented this waiver to you? Did you start getting a sense that hey, maybe these people aren't maybe I'm in the wrong building. Like maybe I contacted the wrong resources here for help. Maybe I'm relying on the wrong people. I mean, what a bad taste that must have left in your mouth. Like, how is a parent supposed to tolerate that? Never mind, accept that. It's beyond unacceptable. It's intolerable. I would have been livid. I don't know what was your response to that?
Well, it's at first I was kind of weirded out. And like I said, I was used to where if the police are interviewing a child, the parent must be present. That's a big difference from them saying, sign this waiver that you could never sue us and we're not liable about anything that happens. And you can't ever see the interview, get a copy of it or anything. And I'm in law school. I'm taking contracts. I'm learning all about contracts. And I'm looking at this I don't want to sign this. This is
it must have been ridiculous. Terrifying. It's well, what is happening here? Is there a pit of spikes beneath this chair? Am I sitting on a trap door?
Yeah. I immediately was questioning it. And then they were like, well, if you don't sign it, she's not going to be able to do the interview. And if she doesn't do the interview, then you're going to be looked at as hiding something because you're not letting her do the interview. And they just started to coerce me about it. So I'm like, okay, well, above all, I want to be cooperative with the police and DCF so I can help my daughter have the thorough investigation. Okay, even though I don't want to, I'm going to sign this under duress and after being coerced and basically.
Yeah, your daughter, your child was exploited right there. They exploited your love for your child and relied on that to get you to sign that document.
Exactly. And so I signed it. I allowed them to do the interview. And during the interview, they have it set up where the child goes in a room where the room has nothing in it except for an easel. And there's a two-way glass. And on the other side, there is the detective and DCF that watches it and listens. The kids and the people in the room cannot see on the other side of the two-way glass. And the social worker, they have a licensed clinical social worker who the one who did her first interview was named Priscilla Westberg. And she was a LCSW that works at Yale. And so basically it was there. They told me that during the interview, I would be sitting in a different room away from it. And they had some advocate to sit in the room with me and for moral support. Then They have Angelina go in this room alone with a social worker that she never met. Then on the other side of the two-way glass, the detective from New Britain and DCF worker are watching. So they tell me, here, just sit in the room with the advocate. We're going to come back when we're done and we'll tell you what happened. Like, I'm supposed to just take their word for it and just believe whatever they say, because I'll never be able to see for myself. If they could say anything, right? But you're not allowed to get a copy. And the fact that they said it's property of the police, New Britain's policy in New Britain police is that you can never, ever get a copy, no matter what. Not even your lawyer. Nobody can ever get a copy. The police keep it forever. But other cities and towns
I'm going
in
to challenge
Connecticut,
that someday. I'll challenge that and I'll win because anything that the police do is public record. There are certain laws that protect victims and things like that, but they're, the victim and their parents, they have rights to certain things. The problem is no one ever challenges these things after they learn about them until people like you and I come along and the other more, I don't know what we should call ourselves. I wouldn't want to say we're more intelligent than anyone. I would just say we're more apt to fight back when something is wrong. If something's being taken from us, we're the type of breed that will respond with a challenge, as opposed to being passive and just turn the other cheek kind of attitude. And I think part of what's wrong with Connecticut as a whole isn't just the government's fault. It's a failure of the people to properly embrace and utilize their system of governance. And I can understand, like, there's no confidence, people don't have any confidence in the government, but it's kind of a failure on the people's part in the sense that the ones who aren't fighting back like us and they're just turning the other cheek, they're kind of permitting all of this to continue. And they're not helping anyone from becoming a victim like they were. And whether it's because they don't have the energy or the intelligence or they're just completely overwhelmed or not is yet to be known. But at the end of the day, it's going to take voices. It's going to take people. It's going to take lawsuits and exposure to bring all this stuff to a head. People need to know what's going on to be able to decide responsibly what we're going to do about it. And if we don't have the means to disseminate accurate information and provide people with the facts about what's really going on, then there's no sense in trying to debate, discuss, or even argue what it is we could potentially do about it, because that's all just gas. It's all just a bunch of nonsense and hot air at that point. So, folks, if you're just joining us, we are live. We are with Theodora Antar, and she is disclosing to you just the tip of the iceberg of her very powerful, tremendous story of corruption. And we're hoping to inspire some people here. It's not about profits, clicks, and views here. It's about real grassroots change. This is perhaps Theodora, real quick, for my viewers, just for your own insight, is someone who I've only been speaking with for a short time, but I have looked at her work at Pro Legal Solutions on YouTube, and it was very inspiring. And I was very humbled to see that she had reached out. She mentioned this earlier. If you're just joining us, she mentioned earlier finding me on Facebook, sounding off against a local corrupt politician by the name of Matt Lesser. And since that time, we have arranged this date and this time to bring her on here, Tyrant Slayer Studios, to introduce her to you. Go follow her stuff, give her a like, give her a subscription over at Pro Legal Solutions on YouTube. You can find a link to her channel in the video description below. This video will be featured on her channel. It's also going to be redistributed on Facebook, on Tyrant Slayer Studios on Facebook, and my other platforms. You can find me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Worthy Son of Liberty. But once again, real quick, Theodora is just exposing the corruption here in the state of Connecticut. Just the tip of it. She's got a very powerful story. It's going to take some time to get through it all, but we can cover a lot here real fast. We're going to keep this going for about another 45 minutes or so. We'll cut it off about 3:15 as her and I have some prior engagements with some other business that we can't discuss publicly at this time, but you will eventually learn about should you choose to follow diligently along this journey of ours in which we are seeking legal recourse and justice here in the state of Connecticut. The racketeering, weaponized socialist nanny police state of Connecticut. And, we've kind of touched on the city of New Britain, sexual abuse against children, the state's failures between DCF, police departments, Yale, the judiciary itself. Every which way you turn, it seems as though parents, victims like Theodora, are kind of just left holding an empty bag and left with a universe of questions, a galaxy of questions that very rarely are answered. Our officials are very rarely held accountable, and we're working towards holding them accountable, providing you transparency and illuminating these very serious issues so that we can together, collectively, as a society, decide what we're going to do about them. So without further ado and any belaboring of this terrible segue, I give the floor back to Theodora. Theodora, thank you so much. It's been an honor having you here. Please take it away and tell the people a little bit more about, kind of give the audience like a 5-minute synopsis for anyone who might have just joined us. Tell them where we're at, why we're here, and where we're going for the next 45 minutes.
Definitely. Thank you. So for those that just joined, I was just talking about how my experience with what turned into 4 different child sexual assault investigations that were assigned to one detective from the New Britain Police Department named Lisa Renee Steves. And I was talking about how upon this investigation first starting, I realized and learned that Connecticut now has a new policy, which it's not a written policy, it's just what they're doing, where whenever sexual abuse of a child is reported to the police or to DCF, rather than the police interview the child and rather than the police investigate themselves, what they started doing is that now they outsource these investigations to third-party nonprofits such as Yale, Klingberg, Hartford Hospital, and others. And they basically have a social worker interview the child rather than the police. And so I was talking about how on October 31st, 2022, my daughter, Angelina, was scheduled to do her first forensic interview, which was scheduled to take place at the Yale Child Abuse Clinic in New Haven, Connecticut. And in the before the interview, Yale basically said that if I didn't sign a waiver of liability that would basically say that I couldn't sue them ever, that I could never get a copy of the forensic interview, I could never listen to it, observe it, or have a copy of it, and that it would permanently remain property of the police department. They said I had to sign that or I couldn't do the interview. So I signed it under duress after they basically coerced me to sign it. And then they had my daughter go in a room that had a 2-way glass with DCF and New Britain PD on one side. And inside the room, they had a social worker named Priscilla Westberg who worked for Yale. And they told me I had to be in another room with an advocate waiting until the interview was over. And that when it was over, they would come and debrief me and tell me what supposedly happened. So on this interview day, I'm waiting. I go in the room. Literally, not even 5 minutes later, they come back. They're like, okay, we're all done. And I was like, what do you mean you're all done? Like, it's been like 5 minutes. And they said, okay, we're going to tell you what happened. They said that they told me that, like, keep in mind, at the time, my daughter was 3 years old. And they said to me that these forensic interviews are done for all children between the ages of 3 through 17. They stated to me that the questions that they asked the children are exactly the same set of questions in the same order, regardless of age. So, in other words, a 3-year-old is expected to have the same level of competency to answer the questions as a 17-year-old. And so they also said no props, no toys, nothing allowed, only an easel and nothing else in the room, which is also strange because young children usually can, express things better through play. And most therapists will have toys in their room so the children can act things out. But Yale wouldn't allow that. So they told me that they asked Angelina the first question that they asked everyone, which is, do you know why you're here? And before I brought her there, DCF specifically warned me and said, don't tell her where you're going. Don't tell her why you're bringing her there, and don't say anything to her. So, of course, I didn't say anything to her. So when they asked her, do you know why you're here? She said, no. And then they said, if a child says no, the whole thing with this forensic interview is that they're not allowed to ask leading questions. So some people might not know what a leading question is. For example, if I say, do you know why you're here? That's not a leading question. We're asking you if you know. But if I said, what room were you in when Dominic assaulted you? Like, that's a leading question, right? You're basically like
Comes
getting
with an
an
implication.
Answer. Yes. And like in court, a lot of times, like, they will like object. Like if a witness is being asked a question that is leading and they're on their direct testimony, the other side can object because you're not allowed to ask leading questions when you're testifying. If you're cross-examining someone, you can ask leading questions all you want. So, they basically came up with this rule that they don't want to have leading questions at all, so that if somebody makes a disclosure during these interviews, that then they can use that as evidence in court. And their argument is like, if there's no leading questions, then the defense attorney can't get that thrown out from evidence because they didn't lead the witness. Okay, so they said that because they have to only ask non-leading questions, that they're limited into what they can do. So their rules are that if they say no to the first question, do you know why you're here? The next thing they'll do is they'll pull out a drawing of like the human body that's like anatomically correct for the age of the child. So they pull out a toddler drawing of a human body and they ask my daughter, what's this body part? And pointed to like the arm. And my daughter says, oh, it's your arm. Okay. Then what's this body part? Oh, your nose. Okay. And then they said, Angelina, is there anywhere on your body that no one else is allowed to touch? Okay, like that's their non-leading question. Is there anywhere on your body that no one else is allowed to touch? She
It's
asked
absolutely
that to
a leading question.
Well, she asked that to a 3-year-old. And the question is so confusing because most adults, when I tell them that, they even need to take a second to be like, wait, what is she? It's almost like a double negative. Like, is there anywhere that no one's allowed to touch? And so, in other words, they were basically trying to ask her, like, do you have any private parts? Instead, they asked it that way. So when they said, is there anywhere in your body that no one else is allowed to touch? Angelina says no. Her answer was no. And she was 3 years old. Okay. The question's confusing. And I never sat my daughter down at 3 years old and had like a conversation with her, like of naming your private parts and stuff like that. Like maybe she knew it was her private part, but we didn't sit there and have like a discussion about it like you would with a child who's maybe a little older. And I had 2 daughters, and it's like I never had to bring this up with my older one at that age, so I didn't think it was like necessary. So, and they told me not to bring give her any info prior to taking her there. So when she answered no to that question, the forensic interviewer, social worker, Priscilla Westberg, immediately ended the interview. Like, instead of asking another question after Angelina said, no, there's nowhere on my body that no one else is allowed to touch, she just says, okay, interview's over. Then they come back in the room. They told me all of this while they're telling me what happened. They have Angelina in another area playing, and they're telling me like everything I just told you. And I was like, well, what does this mean now? And then the detective from New Britain PD, Lisa Renee Steves, says, oh, well, since they're closing the forensic interview and since she stopped the interview, I'm also going to immediately close the police investigation as well. So because my daughter said that she doesn't have private parts, the forensic interview was immediately terminated, and the police investigation that had just started was immediately terminated because a 3-year-old answered no instead of yes when the answer should have been yes, to get through their stupid little maze of questions that you have to get through to win a prize. Like, it's a literal joke. Like, the way that they set that up is to silence young children, because you put a 15-year-old, 16, 17-year-old in there, of course they're going to answer the questions. They're going to know the answer. But how is a little kid supposed to go through that, like, and then they just end the interview and close the investigation?
Well, yeah, it begs a lot of questions at that point. As opposed to ending the interview, for example, I think, and what do I know? But I think that would have been the cue, the prompt, if you will, to start gauging the answers that the child's giving by asking the same question in a different way to see if it yields a different answer. Because then you can determine, as the more intelligent individual in the room in control of the interview, that the child's not really understanding and they're just kind of, like a multiple choice yes or no kind of. The child should have been gauged. The level of understanding of the child should have been gauged at that point, is what I'm trying to say, as opposed to stopping the interview. The interviewer should have, I think there's a number of ways to do it, but one way to do it would be ask the same question differently to see if the answer is the same. See if you can ask that same question 5 different ways, or ask, kind of like before a polygraph starts, they make you say your name. They ask questions that are going to yield yes as a response so that they can gauge what your heart rate's doing and what things are on that benchmark. To benchmark, a benchmark should have been made on your daughter first to see her depth of rationality and understanding. Did she really understand the context of that question? Let's phrase it differently now. Let's ask blunt. Let's ask in a convoluted way and see if the answers are all no. If one answer comes back yes, well, then that means we can't conclude this interview, because now we need to find out on what level we need to communicate upon with this child to get accurate answers and genuine understanding from the child to provide accurate answers.
Yeah, and also it's like if a prerequisite to her passing the interview or participating in the interview was that she needed to know her private parts, they should have told me that. They should have told me, your child is expected to know the private parts prior to this interview starting. Instead, they told me, don't say anything about it. Send her in there completely clueless and don't say a word. And so it's like, people online made some good comments, good points, saying to me, if they asked her if she has private parts and she says no, that should have been a huge red flag to continue asking questions, because a child who thinks they have no private parts is a child who believes that anyone's allowed to touch them anywhere on their body. Essentially, is
right. And then
saying.
We need to find out where that notion came from and who's
exactly
providing that. Right.
Exactly. And a good, intelligent interviewer, or a good detective, if they actually allowed detectives to interview the kids, would have picked up on that. But instead, Detective Lisa Steves from the New Britain Police Department decided that I mean, it's one thing if the interviewer is bound by the rules of the interview where they say that they have to only ask non-leading questions. And if the therapist can't think of a next question to go to stop the interview, fine. That's your policy, fine. But don't close the police investigation. Why would you terminate the police investigation just because the interview? That makes no sense. And so like the detective was like, oh, well, I'm going to close the investigation because, there was no disclosure in the forensic interview. And I'm not going to interview the suspect because just in case there's any future disclosures, I don't want to taint any potential future investigations by interviewing him now. And I'm just like, okay. And like, I'm like sitting there, like, I don't want to argue. Like I'm in the room with like the doctor from Yale, the social worker, the other lady that's the advocate, the detective, the DCF worker, like they're all like surrounding me in the office. And I'm just like trying to be as cooperative as possible and like, stay calm and like keep it together and stuff. So I was just like, okay. And like, then like the detective and DCF said to me that because my daughter didn't make a disclosure in the forensic interview, that the claims were now going to be unsubstantiated and unfounded. So now it was going to say that a sexual abuse investigation was started and closed and labeled as unfounded.
Right. So now it's working against you. The whole thing ends up being counterintuitive because it was being controlled by the administrators of it for what is most equitable on the judicial side of things. This was all just a dress rehearsal for what happened in family court, if you ask me. And I don't even have the whole, all the details, if you will. I just know instinctively, it seems to me this was all just a prerequisite to what is most equitable for them later in the timeline of events during your quest to help your kid. And they, every step of the way, are working against you, roping you in, acting like your friends. And they're just exploiting both you and your children and even your ex for the sake of their own equity, for the public employee unions, for the judiciary itself, which has been trying to desperately fill a budget gap since Malloy in 2015. But I digress. It's so disgusting and sick, and it's so boldly obvious to anyone who has experienced it. The problem I think people like you and I have is even in our greatest, most sincere and genuine efforts to articulate and tell these stories, they seem, to the people who haven't experienced this stuff, it's almost so alien, and it's always so mammoth of, it's so mountainous, it's so big that it's not necessarily overwhelming. It's just too much to believe. It's too much to deal with people. How do we reach people that, are like us in the sense that they want to protect their kids and they want to do the right thing? But you have such an enormous, how do we take something that's so enormous and consolidate it so that the average person can get their head around it within 15 minutes and then respond to it productively or even negatively? We want critics too, right? I mean, we want everyone to kind of look at this and speak their mind on this. And it's like, how would you, of all the things people like you and I have learned, I'm interested in knowing how you would suggest presenting it in a like, say we were under time constraints, say we were on a game show, for lack of a better example. I'm sorry. and it's like, all right, you've got 10 minutes on the clock here and blah blah blah, and you got to get to the orange flag and blah. Will she pull it off? Okay, so we have like a certain length of a attention span of people and a certain time in the universe to get all the stars to align perfectly for our kids and things. How do you suggest doing that? Like, how do you captivate the people for a short time, present an enormous bit of information in that short time without overwhelming and scaring everybody away, and then collectively organize with that same group of people to react in a joint effort against what you've disclosed, collectively to yield the best result in favor of everyone. How would you do that? Like, how do we reach everybody? How do we finally put it all into something people can hold in their hand and hand around and go, did you see this shit? Did you see this? I mean, well, because what we do now is great. We're doing the right thing. We're doing everything we know how to do best we can do it. I mean, what else can we do? But if 3-hour videos scare people, or talking to strangers scares people, or it's like we hold an event on the town green or something, and people will be apprehensive to come for whatever the reason. What do you think we can do of all the things we've learned? What do you think we could do with that to really raise awareness in a manner of which has not been necessarily done before, or maybe it's been done before, but less successfully? How do we become more successful in telling our stories and getting the people's attention, I guess, because even today, I would say, there's winds working against us here. And, I wouldn't want to say we're burning rubber here, because that would be disparaging of us. But I would say we need to do more together. What would you suggest doing? What have you seen in your experience? I'm sure you know all about trolls and shadow banning and the winds against us, if you will. What would you try to say to people in the next 15 minutes to get them to watch this video, to get them to understand why they should watch the video, and why your case is important? Who are you? Why is this important? And why is it important to reflect on what you and I and our friends are going to presenting on your case and my case, and the things we're doing in response to the state of Connecticut and its corruption and its egregious activities against innocent people for the sake of its own equity? Let's see if you can answer these questions in a shorter manner of which I've asked them. I'm sure you do great.
Yeah. So basically, I think that, I have my story has gotten a lot of attention nationally, internationally. My old page on TikTok that had 133,000 followers. In March of last year, it had maybe 7,000. And in one day, I went from 7,000 to 14,000. And that was based on me going live while I was being illegally detained by the police at JFK Airport. And so that live stream had 500,000 people on it. It was so crazy. And most of the people were saying bad stuff, but a lot of people were sending me gifts and happy that they were telling me keep sticking up for your rights and stuff like that. And then all these people started following me. So that's kind of how a little bit more attention came. But then I kept posting, and no one really cared, whatever. People remembered me from that. As soon as I started posting more about what happened with this, I then made a video that was 10 minutes long. And I just called it my story, because everybody kept asking, make a video about what happened. And it's so hard to condense it. So I made this 10-minute video where I basically told the story, and in a condensed way. But then at the same time on YouTube, I would post the full hearings. I made a Google Drive folder that I put the link in my bio on all my socials, that you can go in this Google Drive link and you can see folders for each of my cases. It's organized by federal court, state court, whatever. You can go click on it. You could see all the filings, because some of the stuff you can't see it. You have to go in person. A lot of it is inaccessible, or you have to pay. And so I started putting all that up there for full transparency, because the trolls will lie and twist it. And so the best way to counter that is with receipts. everybody, the only thing they can do to come after me is to ban me, silence me, and censor me, because they know that I have proof. Like, my proof is way too powerful for that. That's why their only go-to is to just shut me up and try to silence me or put me in jail or forcibly in a mental ward or whatever. But just like to kind of wrap up what I was saying in 5 minutes or less, like, after that investigation in 2022 was closed, I then was forced to continue sending my daughter to her dad's from November of 2022 until February 2023, when another disclosure was made. And again, I reported to DCF. Again, the same detective from New Britain was assigned. And again, they sent her for a forensic interview at Yale. And the second time around, she actually made a disclosure. She kept she kept saying like she was doing sexual behaviors on her stuffed animals. And when I asked her, what are you doing? She said, I'm doing what my brother Dominic does to me. I'm sitting on my toys like Dominic sits on me, as she's like doing sexual motions on the toys, right? How much more clear can you be? So when they wouldn't let her bring the toy in the second interview, they just were like, okay. So in the second interview, she disclosed saying, Dominic sits on me and has me sit on him. And when they finished the interview and came to tell me that, the detective from New Britain, Lisa Renee Steves, was like, okay, well, even though it might be inappropriate, none of this is criminal. And he could just claim that they were just wrestling. So we're not going to do anything. And I was like, I literally was like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, she's like, oh, it doesn't meet the statute for sexual assault of the 4th degree. I go, let me see the statute. I pulled it up on my phone. I started reading it to her. I'm like, how does this not meet the statute? Then she got all mad because I was like questioning her like intelligence and authority, which as a law student, I'm more educated than her. I know way more than her, more trained than her. And she's like, well, we can have an appointment next week with the state's attorney and my supervisor, blah, blah, blah. I have to go. And she leaves. And so then like, I was really mad. That's when I reached out to the state's attorney's office in New Britain, Mayor Erin Stewart's office, and others. I wanted to find out, why are they sending kids for forensic interviews instead of having police interview the children like they used to do? The law says the police can interview the children. Why are they outsourcing these investigations to third-party companies that are private nonprofit organizations like Yale? And I spoke to a man at the New Britain Superior Court State's Attorney's Office, and his name was David Rohan. He said that he used to be a police officer at the New Britain PD. So former New Britain PD turns, he said his role was an inspector at the state's attorney's office. And when I asked to talk to the state's attorney, they transferred me to him. And I talked to him for like an hour. I told him everything that happened. I asked him, why are they doing this? I said, I was through my own investigation where I was interviewed by the police. Why are they not interviewing her? And he said, that this is not a law to have the forensic interviews, that the only reason why they started doing it was because in the past, when the police would interview kids for sexual assault investigations, the police would ask all sorts of leading questions and invasive questions. And then the perpetrator would get a defense attorney who would then go to court and say, oh, strike the interview from evidence because there was leading questions, there was this, there was that. You put the words right in the kid's mouth. So they would then, according to David Rohan, because so many attorneys would get this police interviews thrown out from evidence, that the state would end up losing all these cases, because if the interview was all the evidence that they had, then they'd lose the case. But here's where that's flawed. I just told you how I was able to get a conviction without any evidence except my statement. The only evidence they had was me showing up in person to testify. So in any case, any child in any age can be called on the stand as a witness. And if they're a victim, they could be any age. So if that's the case, that they get their interview thrown out of evidence and then they say they lose the case, that's because in Connecticut, 90% of the cases don't go to trial. They try to force you to take a plea deal. And if you won't take a plea deal, they just give up. So with these cases, they'll say, okay, the interview is out of evidence. We have no DNA. We have nothing else. Let's just dismiss the case. And
they let it die on the vine.
They let it die. And then that goes on their list of cases that they lost, versus if they get a conviction or if they win at trial or if they get a plea deal, they won that case, right? So David Rohan said that because the state kept losing so many cases and it was costing them so much money to keep losing all of these cases, that now they just developed this new idea to outsource all the sexual abuse investigations to forensic interviews, where the police never even meet the kids, never talk to the kids, never question the kids. And social workers are asking them questions, which we already demonstrated how problematic the line of questioning is, especially for the younger kids. And it's almost designed to silence the young kids. And when they're coming out and saying,
like it's to outsource a guaranteed winning case for the Connecticut judiciary. That's
exactly.
All.
They're prioritizing the judiciary winning the cases and the state winning the cases to cut down on their funding and optimize their profits. But the problem is that they're also not investigating and arresting, and victims are not getting justice. And like Lamont loves to go and say, crime is down, crime is down. You want to know why crime is down on paper? Because less people are getting arrested. If they used to arrest 1,000 sexual abuse perpetrators and only 500 got convicted, but now they only arrest 500 if they know they can convict them, and those other 500 don't even get arrested, then you're giving those 500 victims, you're taking away their chance to go and testify as a witness, because any child witness or even a teenager who goes to the jury and tells their story, and they'll know right away if the kid is lying. You know what I mean? If you're on the jury and you see a child saying their story didn't change, their story's the same, why would the child lie? You know what I mean? So like, I think that taking away that chance for them to even participate in the legal process, because you're only going to make an arrest if you know you can convict. You don't need a conviction. You don't need beyond a reasonable doubt to arrest. You need probable cause. There was plenty of probable cause through my daughter's disclosures, not to mention throughout the whole process, she continued to make more disclosures at home. And the detective said, if she makes more disclosures, even if you don't catch her on video, send it to us, send it to us. I sent them more than 70 disclosures. And the detective said she only got 4 of the 70 videos. She doesn't know where the other ones ever were. And even later, I sent them stuff. And so I ended up reaching out to Erin Stewart. And I wrote her a message on Facebook. And I said, this is what's happening in the New Britain PD. I feel like my rights are being violated. My child's not being protected, She was like, oh, you should write she's like, when you write an email and CC the detective's supervisor, that's her sergeant, and CC her lieutenant. She's like, you can CC the sergeant, the lieutenant, the assistant chief, and even the chief. And David Rohan told me the same thing. He said, if they're not following it, go up the chain of command. And when I tried to go up the chain of command, like I was advised to do by state and public and local officials, such as Erin Stewart and David Rohan, I was then retaliated against. And there were 2 more sexual abuse investigations after that in March and May of 2024, where Detective Lisa Steves was assigned to all of them. They assigned her to all 4, and she never once met my daughter. How can she investigate if my daughter was sexually abused without ever meeting her? You're going to tell me if she was abused when you never met her, you never said a word to her ever before? And so literally after 4 open and shut investigations where they refused to investigate and refused to do anything, I then lost custody of my daughter because the family court judge accused me of lying. And she said, look, Miss Antar reported this to DCF and they kept saying it's unfounded. Therefore, she's lying. Therefore, now we're going to take your daughter and give her to the person who she's saying she's being sexually abused by. And that happened in May of 2023. And she's been there ever since. And I've been fighting so much. And I reached, to my point from earlier, I reached out to Erin Stewart after I lost custody. And I think I commented on one of her posts or something, expressing displeasure with her and, everything that they're doing in New Britain. And she immediately blocked me. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that public officials can block people like that. So then that account ended up getting banned. I went on an old Facebook that I had from like long time ago from high school. And I just started using that one. And I noticed Erin Stewart all over my feed again. So I went to go comment. Within seconds of commenting, I was blocked again. So I ended up sending an email to the mayor's office, and I CC'd like the attorneys for the city of New Britain and like her and everything. And I was like, you have until the end of the day to unblock me. And I said what I had to say. And next thing you know, I'm magically unblocked. And I think she even responded to my email. I didn't even look at her response yet, but I will, and I will be responding to it. And, you know, it's just the fact that if public officials don't like what you say in Connecticut, that they just block you and delete your comments and silence you. This isn't communist China, and Connecticut needs to stop acting like it.
Hey, listen, even worse than that, there was a guy who got, victimized same as us by our weaponized racketeering judiciary and moved out of the state and started using Facebook to sound off on the Connecticut judges, and they extradited him from out of state on a breach of peace and disorderly conduct charge because of what he said about a judge. Exposing the truth about a judge will get you unlawfully arrested and even extradited across state lines back to Connecticut to face malicious prosecution. That's how out of control this rogue government is out here. It is absolutely no joke. It is very serious. Talking about what the government is doing to the people in the state of Connecticut is genuinely a risk to your health and safety. I've received 4 death threats doing what I do. So obviously I'm doing something right. I wear that as a badge of honor. Last death threat I got was November of last year. So we're going on. We got an 11-month run, a 10-month run. That's pretty good. I haven't gotten a death threat in 10 months. I haven't been publishing much in 10 months. So maybe I ought to step it up. I guarantee the more you and I discuss this matter and disclose and disseminate to the American people and to the international community alike, the more turbulent things in our lives will become. It's going to take longer to get our tax returns. IRS will target us. Facebook will target us. We'll get shadow banned, all that stuff. But guess what? We're not going to stop here at Tyrant Slayer Studios. Theodora is not going to stop for her children. I'm not going to stop on behalf of my children. Together, strangers alike, we can all kind of collectively gather around our kids in the sacredness of our families. I wouldn't want to use the word fight, but we can collectively put forth an effort against the state of Connecticut and work collectively to expose it, to make it well known to everybody exactly what's happening here, and show them how it's happening, and take them along the journey to reveal to them what we're going to do about it and what they could do about it and how we're going to make sure none of this stuff happens again. When we're too old and tired to do anything about it, we're going to be able to sit back and watch our kids live a better quality of life and have a better chance of success and be in a more free sort of creative environment in which they can tap into their inner individuality and create something for the world. I mean, God forbid we all actually do something positive here in the United States and for the rest of the world for a change. I think Theodora Antar is a tremendous force for progress. I think she is fit for public office. I wish you and your family all of the best on this journey to justice. I'm going to be here. Tyrant Slayer Studios is going to be here. We're going to be working to reveal to everyone her story, my story, and your story. The mantra here is Tyrant Slayer Studios, the People's Press Studio. So it has been a privilege and an honor, a very humbling experience having you on here today with me, Theodora. I wish my platform was flourishing with the juices it once had at some time, but I've been shadow banned and beaten down by our own government quite substantially. But nevertheless, I'm still here. We're going to get the message out one way or another, and we're going to continue to meet and dive further into this. Maybe we can even get other victims to come forward. We can do an open panel. You and I can talk for a half hour on a specific of your case, and then invite people to join us who have experienced that same sort of egregious abuse of power, and let them provide their testimonial experience, and then backstage we can kind of culminate and collect with more people and see what happens there. As the late John Kennedy once said, united there is little we cannot do in a host of collaborative ventures. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to collaborate, and we're going to bring to you the latest and greatest on both Theodora's cases and situation. Mine, we're going to touch base going forward and provide you guys updates with Andrew Pritchard. I think he's the audience here has been dying for updates on that, and I've been negligent in that regard. So for that, I do apologize. Sam Agliari, I think, is another gentleman in the state of Connecticut worthy of note. And with mention of him, of course, we're going to have to say hello to U.S. senatorial candidate John Flynn, who has also been illegally incarcerated in the state of Connecticut for up to, I think it was 120 days in the gulag. Yes, that's correct, ladies and gentlemen. You heard me correct. We have a gulag here in the state of Connecticut. It is so eloquently dubbed the Whiting Forensic Hospital, located in Middletown, Connecticut. The slightly bent ivory tower of corruption, right here in a small union-dominated city. But with that, I must digress. Theodora, if you would like to pitch a farewell to the audience here and let them know what they can expect from us the next time we meet, that would be duly appreciated. Thank you so much. After you close it out, I'm going to go ahead and end this live. The floor is yours. Say goodbye and let everybody know what we have to look forward to, please.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you letting me be on and giving me this opportunity today. And I look forward to coming on again and talking some more and deeper when we have some more time. And if everyone wants to follow me on YouTube, my channel is Pro Legal Solutions, and it's Theodora Antar on TikTok. And if anyone has questions for me, you can email me, theodoraantar@gmail.com, if you'd like to discuss your case or anything else. And thank you so much. And I'll be looking forward to my next guest appearance.
Excellent. And with that, folks, that's Tyrant Slayer Studios. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much.